Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. So, the story of David and Goliath, it is, without a doubt, the universally known ultimate underdog tale. I mean, we all know the broad strokes, right? A young shepherd boy steps onto a battlefield and takes down this massive, terrifying warrior with just a single stone from a sling. It's this incredible story of courage against totally insurmountable odds. But there's this tiny, seemingly minor detail in the ancient text that has actually puzzled historians, military strategists, and commentators for centuries. And it's a detail that, once you really unpack it, kind of completely changes how you view this entire encounter.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is the central tension. If David had absolute, unwavering faith that God was going to deliver this giant into his hands, why prepare excess ammunition? I mean, really, why take 5 stones if you literally only need 1? Was he lacking faith? Was he, sort of hedging his bets with a backup plan just in case he missed?
To get to the bottom of this, we're going to peel this story back like an onion. We'll look at this number 5 across 3 distinct layers. First, the gritty battlefield reality, then the literary beauty of the story, and finally, the profound spiritual symbolism.
So, layer 1, the battlefield reality and practical military wisdom.
Let's set the historical context real quick here. A sling in the ancient world was not a child's toy. It was a deadly weapon used by highly trained military specialists. And just look at what David was walking toward. Goliath was a champion warrior. We're talking heavily armed with a massive spear, a sword, incredibly thick armor, and just years of brutal frontline combat experience. From a strictly military standpoint, walking into that engagement with just one single projectile, that would have been practically suicidal.
So the crucial point here is that carrying multiple stones was simply prudent military strategy. Even the absolute best, most expert warriors never entered combat with only one shot. And this brilliantly illustrates that having full trust in God perfectly balances with wise, responsible action. David trusted completely, sure, but he still chose a proven weapon, selected suitable ammo, approached tactically, and prepared for more than just one strike.
Next up, the physics of the sling. Why smooth stones? The text specifically notes that David didn't just grab random rocks. He took 5 smooth stones from the brook. Why smooth? Well, it all comes down to the practical physics of ancient warfare.
There are 3 really distinct military advantages here. Number 1, better aerodynamics. A smooth stone flies straighter, without the awkward wobble of jagged edges, which gives it incredible velocity and pinpoint accuracy. Number 2, a better fit in the sling. A rounded stone releases super cleanly from the pouch, ensuring perfect precision timing. And number 3, they're denser. Running water naturally acts like a tumbler, removing weak edges over time and leaving behind a hardened, compact projectile. David wasn't just grabbing gravel off the ground. He was an experienced warrior, intentionally selecting premium ammunition.
Moving on to layer 2, the storyteller's craft and the literary drama. Now, I want us to actually physically slow down for a second here, because the narrative itself slows way down in this moment. Notice the incredible contrast. On one side, you have the armies panicking, soldiers are trembling, and Goliath is roaring chaos and threats across the valley. But then, it's like the camera pans away from all that noise. It focuses on David. He calmly walks over to a brook. He is quiet, focused, and totally deliberate as he selects his stones. The storyteller is intentionally highlighting this dramatic difference between the loud, noisy intimidation of the giant and the calm, steady intentionality of the shepherd.
5 gathered, 1 chosen, 4 left unused. There is this beautiful literary tension in this excess, because we, the readers, later discover that only 1 impossible shot was actually needed. Those 4 unused stones end up acting as silent witnesses to the completeness and the swiftness of the victory. The giant didn't require repeated attempts. It wasn't some drawn-out brawl. The victory came swiftly on the very first strike.
And that brings us to layer 3, the deeper symbolism and the spiritual significance.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can transition from the battlefield into the spiritual truths people have drawn from this event over the centuries. While the text doesn't explicitly spell out a hidden meaning, there are 3 enduring interpretations. The first is prepared faith, trusting fully without being careless or presumptuous. David modeled both dependence on God and diligence. The second is divine sufficiency, the idea that God's power exceeds the apparent need, leaving a surplus. And the third is the 5 giants theory. 2 Samuel mentions Goliath actually had other giant allies from Gath, so David might have been anticipating a wider conflict. Now, that last one is a bit speculative for sure, but regardless of which theory you lean toward, they all communicate really meaningful truths.
This also builds a much deeper contrast between Saul and David. King Saul relied entirely on visible security, man-made armor, conventional warfare, worldly strength. But David completely rejected that borrowed strength. Instead, he represents covenant confidence, relying on humble, nature-shaped objects and a faith he had already personally proven.
And we see this pattern throughout the text. God so often works through the familiar and the humble, rather than through enchanted weapons or grand, shining artifacts. Just a simple shepherd's sling and a staff.
Clay jars and torches. The power you see was never actually in the stone itself. The stone was simply an ordinary object that was surrendered in faith.
Loaves, fish, and ultimately a cross. It's this recurring biblical reversal. Human beings are always looking for grandeur and massive weaponry, but God repeatedly chooses the simple, the ordinary, or the seemingly foolish things to shame the mighty and completely overturn human expectations of power. Which brings us to this really powerful motif of one. Notice the building pattern here. One act of faith, one obedient step, one sacrifice, one deliverer. When God determines the outcome, excess force is just completely unnecessary. The decisive moment only required one stone, because the battle wasn't won by conventional human power to begin with.
What God uses powerfully is often first shaped quietly. Remember the brook? That running water didn't smooth those stones instantly. It took time, pressure, friction, and the steady flow of water to erode all that roughness. And just as those stones were refined over time, God often shapes people through hidden seasons of obscurity, trials, and unnoticed faithfulness long before they ever step foot onto the battlefield.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to think about. What ordinary thing is being shaped in your life right now? Because those quiet, repetitive seasons of preparation, those moments where you feel like you're just being smoothed out by the current of life, those might just be the exact things setting you up for a decisive victory. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep looking for the profound in the ordinary.